All right, we are live. We are back and doing our next in the Rise Next series for AI upskilling and workforce development in AI. And today it's going to be one of the most intriguing and fun conversations that I get to share with everyone because I've been having these conversations with my good friend Curtis Morley, who is joining us today. We are talking about mastering AI and EI, the must have go forward leadership style and engagement that everyone needs to understand what is happening in this space. And so Curtis and I have a long friendship. I think it's been, Curtis, I think it's been 5 years or so ago that we met when you were with the University of Utah,
Yeah, at
with
least,
the
yeah.
Pollard Institute, and
Hmm.
quickly became friends in a lot of different ways, and was the first person I called when I wrote my book after he had launched his book to get advice with his best-selling book that is out and everybody should be reading. And I'll let him share more on that. But also over these last 5 years, is my background's been in technology and have really made this shift into AI and now consulting companies on AI transformation, pairing that with the work that we do from a workforce development and leadership development. I started speaking a few years ago on emotional intelligence. And what I'm seeing and have started to integrate and recognize as we do AI implementation is that you cannot skip emotional intelligence in the workplace from a leadership development and have successful transition into AI. And so we're talking about this intersection today about artificial and emotional intelligence, and there are some amazing technologies coming up in this new concept called emotion AI that I am seeing everywhere. So we're going to have this really fun conversation because Curtis now is working on counterfeit emotions
Hmm.
and launching a new book. You can find out more at counterfeitemotions.com. It's there on the screen, but author, speaker. And when I asked him, I'm like, hey, how do I introduce you? He said, I am the world's leading emotionologist. I love that. So I'm going to let you tell more about your background and experience, Curtis, as we kind of kick off this conversation today.
That sounds great. So, most of my life and career has been with entrepreneurship and with technology, specifically technology companies. And my first book, like you talked about, was all about entrepreneurship. It's called The Entrepreneur's Paradox. It's on Amazon everywhere. But it's in the last 5 years, my life has taken a dramatic shift. And even though I love entrepreneurship, I'm very passionate about it. It's taken a very dramatic shift for me in my personal life as well as in my business life. And like you said, even though I've been in the business world, wrote a best-selling book on business, my focus today is on counterfeit emotions and
Mhm.
how every emotion that serves us has a counterfeit except for one. There's only one emotion that doesn't have a counterfeit, and that's peace.
Mm.
And helping people understand the difference between authentic and counterfeit emotions, for example, guilt and shame. They look and feel and act like each other, but the counterfeit creates a destructive cycle of disconnection in our lives.
Mhm.
In leadership, the idea of abundance, the abundance mentality versus accumulation, the idea of how to deal with pain
Mhm.
versus its counterfeit of misery, and understanding those really play into the leadership factors.
Yeah.
One that oftentimes blows people's mind is that nice is the counterfeit of kind.
Yeah, they think it's the same thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And what I love with what you're saying is that you love entrepreneurship and business, and then you've made this emotion. What we're going to be talking today is that they both matter and they actually work together.
Yeah.
Being able to bring the business and emotion together, because like in my 30-year history in technology, it was always like, well, emotion doesn't belong in the workplace. But I can tell you, workplaces are just these bubbling cauldrons of emotion. Are you kidding me? To say that emotion does not exist in business is just BS. It's just not true. And yet we've said, oh no, just no, there's this assumption that emotion is like somebody crying and being sad. Like emotions are one of those things that, as I've kind of dug into this space, and what we're going to talk a little bit more is, it's a competitive advantage. It's a form of leadership, being self-aware, being able to recognize you're having emotions, right? Because every decision in business has an emotion before you make the decision.
Yes. Yes.
And understanding that it goes through this limbic system and emotion before we decide, being able to understand that, and that there's going to be like, are we making emotional decisions, or are we making logical decisions? And are we pausing, but, not reacting to our emotions? And I think that's the power of the future that's being created between in this transition into the AI workspace, and what's happening there, and how companies are seeing the competitive advantage here. So I kind of want to move forward into this discussion of this trend that's happening, because I don't know if everybody recognizes. And so I wanted to get your perspectives on this. So one of the things that I've seen are all of the AI products that are coming out that are around this idea of emotion AI.
Mm-hmm.
And the future of business and what's happening is it's connecting us more to our humanity. I think there was this feeling this last couple of years of this fear of like, oh, AI is going to disconnect us from our humanness. It's going to take over, right? And not realizing that there's opportunities to actually expand our humanity through recognizing and developing awareness of emotion.
Yeah.
And so a couple of the ones I wanted to talk about with you and get your ideas on are the ones I've seen. And even this morning, I was up watching CNBC with my husband before he caught a flight. And they were talking about some of these technologies in emotion AI that are coming out. So customer experience, where they're seeing body language to be able to identify the emotion of the customer to be able to better react, right? Like, are things escalating? There's voice, which my good friend Christy Holt's been running Bibonics for years, right? On this, recognizing we all have emotions and it shows up in our voice. And AI can pick up the little nuances in our voice that show emotion and be able to react and respond to that and coach to it. Empathetic sales systems are now, I'm working with another company called Workplace AI, where it's identifying the sentiment data and analysis within the calls to be able to help develop leadership, right? Like, there's all of the language, our body, our voice. These are all AI trends that are coming together, and the technology that's helping drive these awareness in emotion. So I'd love your take on this, on what you're seeing as far as these key trends that are coming forward.
Yeah, and looking at trends, like even before the advent of AI, it was identified that the number one key indicator for success in business, number one, is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Above your Harvard degree, above any certification or skill set, the number one indicator for success in business was EI, was that emotional intelligence. And now we're moving into a place, it reminds me, do you remember Minority Report?
Yeah.
The movie where he walks into the store, he walks into the Gap, I believe it was, and it says, "Welcome back, Mr. Yamamoto. How did you like those chinos?" And it had a direct message for exactly him. And that's what we're starting to see
happening, right? And just recognizing that we're being emotionally monitored. We had this conversation, you think, as we talked about having this. It's like, do we realize how much we're being emotionally monitored?
Yeah.
Marketing, how do you sell something? You drive off emotion, right? It's emotion. You make buying decisions based on emotion, and then you justify your decision in buying that off logic. So you're being sold to and monitored, and it's a little creepy, but it's happening, right?
It's a little creepy, and at the same time, we just went through Black Friday and Cyber Monday, And it was awesome because every notification on my phone,
Yeah.
every single one was things I was actually interested in.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, Amazon, and all of a sudden here's all of these things, and I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah. I want that. Oh
I
yeah. Let's,
really do want to buy that.
yeah.
And so it sorts through the clutter. It was the best. It was the best Black Friday, Cyber Monday experience I've ever had because it customized everything directly for me, and
Yeah.
it's getting smarter.
Yeah. What's funny is I keep just getting served up AI stuff, like selling me AI platforms. That's what I'm getting right now, just because I've been doing so much research in it. So it is following what I'm searching. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's fascinating because if you look at, yeah, with like Christy Holt, I love her FeelWise technology that every emotion has a frequency.
Mhm.
There's a frequency that follows each emotion, and she's created this incredible app where you can speak into your phone and it will tell you what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And this is so critical because, and if anybody doesn't have the app, go get the FeelWise app. It's
Mhm.
brilliant. But it's so critical because we as a society are actually learning to numb. And,
Right.
and we do that with the doom scrolling. We do
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
with the bombardment of information. We actually are starting to numb out and become desensitized.
Mhm.
The Surgeon General right now, he said that we are in an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
We are more connected than ever on devices and social media and computers and all of the platforms, and yet we're less connected than ever.
Right. And it's just we see it with our kids. We see it in the challenges with suicidal ideation. I had a son that went through that and had to really work through some challenging, incredibly challenging times. And the technology is creating some of it. And at the same time, I'm wondering, is there opportunity here to interrupt and use technology to disrupt that at the same time?
Yeah, and that
I think that self-awareness, like you were talking in like, can I do a check-in and say, how am I doing right now? Just that first step in emotional intelligence is self-awareness, right? Of,
yeah,
am I okay right now?
Brene Brown did a study with over 7,000 people, and she asked them, what are you feeling in the moment? So right now, what are you feeling?
Mhm.
And for everybody that's on here, ask yourself, what are you feeling right now? Is
Yeah.
it intrigue? Is it joy? Is it curiosity? Is it, what are you feeling? When she did this study, people were only able to identify three emotions. That's it.
Mhm.
Glad, sad, mad. Am I happy? Am I upset? Or, am I sad or despondent? That
Right.
was those were the only three emotions people were able to identify in the moment. If you get cerebral
Mhm.
and say, oh, just list emotions, sure, people can list emotions. But then you ask them, okay, list the emotions you're feeling, and they
Yeah.
freeze up like, I don't know. What am I feeling?
We
How?
haven't been trained on it. Like we didn't, I don't know. From my perspective, nobody informed me about emotion. And I think a lot of, uh, I don't want to speak for everyone. Some people may be more emotionally aware than I am, but growing up, but it was like you just kind of buried it and didn't realize what you were going through and reacting rather than going, oh, that's what that is. And I think that
Yeah.
even in my kids, they're becoming more informed in this, which is wonderful, right? And they've been educating me in some of these things of I just kind of like compartmentalized and be like, push those emotions away, just get the job done, right? That was kind of my approach
Yeah.
in the workplace, especially. And I think about the opportunity, like if you have a big meeting coming up and you can check in with yourself, like through some of these AI apps, and say, how am I doing right now? If I go in to do a big all hands meeting or I've got a big client meeting, can I like tune into myself for a moment and make sure I'm prepared to go into that because you're going to have better outcomes if you've got your emotions in control
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
have those conversations.
Yeah. And that in the future, this I was having a discussion with one of my friends, Tim Cap, and he's brilliant in the AI world, one of the leaders in AI. He even helped with the AI for Good initiative at the UN. And we were having this conversation. I said, is there anything humans will be able to do better than AI?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, nope, there is nothing. Manufacturing, you've got robots, and you marketing, you've got robots that are monitoring the marketing intelligence. You've got, literally AI creating entire commercials and ads, video ads
Yeah.
for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you, in the future, it's not happening quite yet. In the future, you and I will go to the exact same website and we will get an ad that is just for Trina and just for Curtis, and that's it. And it will be created on the fly using AI. And so I was like, well, there's got to be something. There's got to be something that that computers won't be able to do as well as humans. And what it narrowed down to is emotion.
Emotion.
AI can they can understand emotion. MIT created this technology that looks at facial recognition to identify emotion, and it's currently 97% accurate. It can tell you through your face what you're feeling, but then how does it feel? How does the computer feel? And what we're seeing as far as trends is a lot of people are just yearning for connection, for the human connectedness. And so you see things like retreats. The retreat business is going insane right now because people need connection.
Yeah. They have to step out of the day-to-day chaos. Speaking of MIT, so as I started to lean into this AI space, I went back to school at MIT just because I was like, I'm curious and I want to learn. And this last year spent a lot of time doing AI product design and moving forward. And one of my professors, and this is kind of this group intelligence and talking about where does human and AI and how is this going to move forward? He'd written a book, Thomas Malone, on superminds. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but I found it so intriguing because they were talking about the fact that anything great that gets created has to be done in a group, right? Anything from innovation and great things in the world, it's not one person that's doing it all. There's a power in people pulling together, right?
Yeah.
And that creates this group intelligence. And they've done seeing if they could measure the intelligence of a group, and they could. And they found some key factors that really create what a supermind. One of the things that they found was that groups that included women, and this isn't a gender thing, I'll kind of clarify more, but the intelligence was higher. And the reason wasn't because they're women. You could have this in men as well, but more often than not, they could detect emotion. They had more empathetic approaches. They were able to, facial recognition, body language, they could read that easier than their male counterparts in the group. And that created higher innovation and creativity and group cohesiveness to create higher intelligence. So you could have men that were good at this as well, but we just, as a society, haven't developed the same. But what they found from there is if you compare it to AI, you had a group of all women, or not all women, all humans, then AI outperforming. But the true supermind is when you put AI and human connection together, is outperforms across the board. And so how do you combine? And that's where I started really digging into this, mastering AI plus EI. You have to have both.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other, right?
Yeah. I think about the Inklings group, which consisted of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, and this group of prolific authors that you could very easily argue that they changed the world with their writings. And C.S. Lewis didn't write Narnia alone. He actually had Tolkien and a Duke and all of these prolific authors helping him write the books. Tolkien was creating the world of elves and dwarves with C.S. Lewis. Like it wasn't just Tolkien. Like he was getting feedback, and some pretty good harsh feedback from Tolkien. It was that collection,
the collection of minds. Yes, that's and and if you translate that now into a business setting, right?
Hmm.
Of really looking at what that means from a leadership perspective and the advantage of knowing that that is the role of bringing together that AI plus EA. You have all these opportunities that are coming up, and companies are starting to lean in and learn about AI. One of the biggest success factors of integrating and implementing AI in your company is the emotional intelligence and change management that's required for adoption and leading teams through change. The main thing, and I want your perspective on fear,
Mm.
because I think that there's a key thing here for companies that are leading through these changes, because one of the biggest concerns right now is is AI going to take my job?
Yeah.
Lots of fear right out there of, I don't want to lean into AI because if AI starts coming in, I may not have a job.
Yeah.
And there's a saying out there right now that's very true. It's not AI is going to take your job, it's the person that knows how to use AI that's going to take your job. So lean into it, right? Don't opt out of it. It's necessary. That's why we're doing upskill training for companies right now. But I want to get your perspective on fear and this idea of counterfeit emotions, because I think I think individuals need to know how to address this within their workplaces. So I'd love your ideas here on fear and recognizing it and moving through that emotion.
Thanks for bringing up this topic because it's so important. And if you look historically, you look at the Industrial Revolution. Right now, the predictions that I've seen for AI changing people's jobs, and yes, you could say replacing, but the truth is people need to work and they still will work.
Mhm.
And it's going to be a shift rather than a
Reskill.
replacement. Yeah, a reskill. But the prediction right now is that by 2030, around 30% of jobs globally will be replaced by AI, which is a
It's it's
massive amount.
it's going to disrupt. It will, right?
Yeah. Yes. And you look back at the Industrial Revolution, and it was between 40 and 50% of people went from farming to industry. So
Mhm.
it's even a bigger shift back then. And I'm not saying that the end of the shift will happen by 2030. It'll keep going. It
Right.
definitely will keep going,
Yeah.
but it will be a shift. And we look at the factor of fear is it's so interesting you bring this up because every counterfeit emotion is the motivation behind every counterfeit emotion is two things: fear and control.
Mm.
And that's what it motivates a counterfeit emotion. And so if we look at this and we say, oh, well, they're going to take over my job, they're going to take over the world, there's all this fear, then we're actually caging our authentic self with
Mm.
fear.
Mm.
And instead of that, like you said, we can embrace it and we can learn it. And it is so amazingly helpful. And it really is a tool that can change what we do. I've seen people who had very little tech background go into become these tech geniuses in the last couple of years just through AI.
Tech moms, I see it every freaking day. Yes.
There we go. That's exactly a perfect example. Is that the wave is coming, and
Hmm.
it's a matter of don't be afraid of the wave.
Lean in, ride the wave, right?
On that
Yeah.
surfboard, get on the surfboard and
Start
let's go.
swimming. Start swimming now. Yeah.
Yeah, because it really will enhance our lives. And like we talked about with the FeelWise app from Christy Holt, the MIT, AI is really playing in the EI world,
Hmm.
that we're not only able to see and recognize emotion better using it, but it's also one thing that's fascinating is that it's now working into the therapy world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think, wait a minute, I'm going to get therapy from a computer?
Yeah. Talk about disruption, right?
Yes.
Will I have a psychologist anymore that's a human? I'm not, it, or a lawyer or right, like all
Yeah.
these professional services could be disrupted. Um, I mean, there are right now that's not going to happen right away because we're not going to be able to go in, but just from like being able to get more tailored, like just like marketing, right? More tailored response, more understanding of who I am as a person, more information on me as a human and my background. It's augmenting, I would say, right? Not replacing in a lot of these areas. I
Yeah.
think that on this fear piece for workplaces that are going through this, this is where I see the opportunity to not ignore, but to address the elephant in the room of that there is fear out here, right? And that our
Mhm.
teams are feeling this fear and to approach it head on. Conversations relieve a lot of that pressure, right? Of um, does my boss understand that I have this concern? And just by leading out with the conversation, say, let's talk about AI in our workplace. Let's talk about, to give me your ideas. We want to lean into this. We're not saying that it's going to automatically replace you. If you're coming forward with ideas and innovative suggestions, that's going to make you more valuable, right? In that organization. And I think organizations that can lean into both the awareness of the opportunities that are coming in AI and empowering your teams with the idea of, I'm going to upskill and reskill you in this space because I see you're valuable. And I know that the more I empower you with this knowledge, the more you're going to empower our organization.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it takes some of that emotional awareness of what maybe your team's going through, or even yourself, right? Where everyone's a little bit on edge, like, what does this mean? And there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of no not set answers in this space right now as we go through this transformation. And
Yeah.
so really this emotional intelligence allows us to address the ambiguity that we're currently in.
If people want to get a leg up, if they really want to get a leg up, the two most important skills in 2030 are going to be understanding AI and
Mhm.
having a really strong EI.
Absolutely.
Those will
That's
be the
those
most.
are the two.
Yeah. And the reason that is because the leaders in the space are going to have the thing that will set them apart. Everything else can be done by better by computers. The thing that will set them apart is having a high emotional intelligence. That is the competitive advantage.
It
There
is.
we go. There's the slide.
There it is. I was primed for it. You did the perfect transition there, Curtis. Um, so this is one of my favorite things to create awareness of in this AI, mastering AI plus EI, because we've talked about marketing, we talked about customer service, sales, right? Let's drive revenue. That's number one. Growth and profitability. Those are the two we're always hitting, right? The two levers for business.
Hmm.
When it comes to emotional intelligence, a competitive advantage, I was talking to another friend of mine, Ryan Bott, and they have a company called Fullcast. And I had him come in and speak at an executive luncheon I was running. And we were talking about this idea of what's the future of sales in AI. And it was really interesting because he was talking about the idea that they're shifting to who they hire are focused on relationships and empathetic sales.
Mm.
They're letting the AI handle all the transactional, like repetitive, like lead qualification, screening, all of that. So your pipeline, right, is like this and it's coming down. AI sits at the top of your sales funnel. It's handling all that large volume, but when it gets down to actually closing the deal, people want to close with a human, right?
Yeah.
They want to trust. You've got to build trust. You've got to be able to solve their problems. You've got to be able to present. And so really the future here for sales and is empathetic sales and being able to have relationships. And with COVID and some of the challenges that we've seen in this disconnect we were talking about and people
Hmm.
becoming numb, this is going to be a skill set that is going to be maybe rare to find
Yeah.
of the relationship, but one that is going to be so critical in this future where we still want the human connection, like you were saying, and we're going to hire for people that know how to have emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. In the 1930s was the Great Depression. In the 2030s, it very easily could be the great disconnection.
Mm.
And it would follow right along with what happened in the Great Depression, but on an emotional level. And like you're saying, like that is emotional intelligence is the one factor that you want to talk to a person. You want to look in their eyes. There's a reason why the eyes are called the window to the soul,
Mhm.
is because you make connection. And it's fascinating because I don't know if you've received one yet, but I got my first AI sales call the other day. I had an AI call me.
Mhm.
It was so good. And even though I've studied this, I work in this, all of that, it was so good. It was a couple minutes before I realized it was AI.
Yeah. I'm actually interviewing. I have a meeting next week with a company that's doing this to help with our sales AI implementation for companies. So it is incredible that front, kind of you had the cold calling lead gen teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be AI, and it's and a lot of it is because it's the conversations are very enriched, and it's that human element sometimes has not been skilled to. Sorry, it's you can tune it a little bit. It is pretty incredible what's
Yeah.
happening in that space. But you still, like I said, the top of the funnel is moving that way. The customer support relationship side is getting disrupted. It's probably going to be the first space really that's truly from a workforce disruption is going to be highly impacted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marketing, we've seen it's across the board. And so I think for a company looking at this, as you upskill your workforces, you're not just upskilling them in AI, but in emotional intelligence. I think that's the key, and the key takeaway for your team is really understanding what is empathy. It's not sympathy. It's not being soft. It's not woo woo.
Yeah.
Empathy is really looking at, can I understand another individual and their problems and from their perspective, and be able to tailor my engagement based on that. That's empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being able to, it's going to drive then that more resilience, being able to be adaptive, um, understanding your team dynamics. I
Mm.
think everybody's, I don't know if you've been in the workforce for any period of time, you've been in a toxic workplace at some point. I can guarantee it. And a lot of that's driven off lack of emotional awareness, right? And being able to be empathetic or understand the viewpoint of another department or another group. And it really all just hinges on how can we build trust and engagement. Those are key aspects. The last thing I'll add there, and then I want to turn it over, kind of the next phase here, is that what they're seeing from an AI integration, let's say you are building and integrating AI into your workplace, like a new product, a new delivery. I ran technology operations and integration for many years and did consulting. The adoption of these products, right? Because it is still just a tool, AI.
Mm.
Um, it hinges on you being able to build trust within your team to drive adoption. You need to build trust within your clients that are using that chat bot or taking that sales call. Can you build trust? And I think recognizing that they go hand in hand becomes a huge competitive advantage for your organization going forward.
Yeah. So critical. And like we've talked about, the ones that are going to be leading that,
Hmm.
ones with the highest emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
those are the ones that are going to be leading those initiatives. And and yeah, I love this slide because AI for insights, because AI is, it's processing trillions of pieces of data, trillions, and maybe even we're into the pedillions now, I'm not even sure. um, but it is massive, so massive that humans can't do it, and that's why the insights are so critical. And then the other side, the empathy is where humans connect. And people, they're saying, well, okay, connection, that sounds all soft and squishy and
Yeah.
woo, right? But connection is it's one of the necessities of life. And people are like, yeah, is it really? Do I really need to connect? And unfortunately, there was an experiment, an unintentional experiment that happened with King Frederick out of Germany. Um, he did an experiment where he wanted to see if children that were born without ever hearing language, what language would they develop naturally on their own? And his guess was Hebrew or Aramaic. He said, I'm guessing that it'll be one of these languages. We're going to take these brand new babies, newborn babies. We're going to put them in a nursery, and then the nursemaids would come in, and the only thing they were allowed to do was to feed them, change their diapers, and make sure they had, the necessities of life. I'm going to put that in air quotes, the necessities of life. And guess what language they developed? It was fascinating.
I have no idea.
None.
No language.
They all died.
Oh,
Every single one of the children in this nursery, in this experiment, died. They had all the food they needed. I know, it's terrible. It's horrible.
This kind of experiment. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was completely unintentional, but they had all the water they needed, all the food they needed. They had their diaper changed. All of, they had a warm environment. They were protected. All of those things you think, food, water, shelter, they just were missing the connection. They weren't being touched. They weren't being held. They didn't have the mother's embrace. And every single one of these children, these newborns, died because they missed connection. And I know that's a horrific example.
It is, but it kind of relays into some of these challenges we talked about earlier in, the increase in suicide, unfortunately, and just this disconnect and this lack of emotional connection and how critical it is. And I think that's what is surprising to me still when I speak to organizations and leadership teams on emotion. And they're like, it doesn't belong in the workplace. I'm like, it's there. Whether you recognize it or not, it is part of your workplace. It's part of your culture. And you're working with people. People are emotional.
Yeah.
You have emotions, right? And so tuning into that and leaning into that and recognizing the power of understanding it is how you're going to drive more successful organizations, and being able to tap into that as a lever for developing and growing your company.
Yeah. Emotions will be your superpower.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can be your superpower. And that's where we need to go, because quite frankly, AI is going to do everything else better.
Yeah. So let's, understand AI, lean into that, upskill in it, understand how to leverage it for the optimization, right? That productivity boost. That I haven't been in an organization yet where we haven't been able to see an increase in productivity, like even the first day. They're like, oh, I can do that. Oh, okay. So I think that's hugely important. But then, okay, now what are we going to do next? Now that we have this room, I had this conversation that was really incredible the other day, where we're talking about, okay, we create all this productivity space, immediately 10%, let's say, of our time is freed up. Are we going to fill it with more stuff and burn our teams out even more? Or could we as an organization say, we're going to take that time and create more connectedness between each other, with our clients, we're going to focus on relationships. And I think this is a decision in your strategy. As we put together AI strategies, there is a decision point of, okay, if we can save these productivity hours, let's not just burn people out more. Let's really lean into this EI and relationship focus and be able to create even greater organizations from that.
Yeah. It's crazy because we use AI on our teams, and And what would have taken days, if not a week or more, of planning and strategy of, okay, what is our 2025 strategy going to look like? And
Mhm.
let's get into the marketing and all this. We put in the proper prompts and we give the AI the proper profile, and it spits out a whole calendar, and it's dang good.
Mhm. It
It's
did.
dang good. And then we have all of this time. And
Yeah.
then we have so much more time to focus on helping people and connecting with people and making that, making that where it used to be this massive task, now it's this very simple task
Mhm.
that's pretty good. Right now it takes some adjusting
Yeah.
as we go, but
Yeah.
then the rest of the time can be spent on what is the real message? How do people resonate with counterfeit emotions, and how do they live their most authentic lives, especially in our new world?
Yeah. One of the things that as we do AI strategy, this is the opportunity of integrating it into your strategy, the people side and the AI side, right?
Hmm.
So if you're developing your strategy for this next year, and we've been doing some workshops, I actually have in our prior series, we have these how to use AI for strategy. And one of the first things that is the opportunity. Not only are you going to be just doing an annual strategy, you should be doing these more frequently now because you've got the pace is incredible in being able to shift and change and get new insights right continually. It's
Yeah,
going to become a, a more frequent exercise because we can do it faster. I think the annual planning was too long anyway. We should be doing this on a quarterly, if not monthly basis, like weekly now, right?
yeah.
So how do we build that engine that can just reevaluate where we're at quickly? But one of the number one things in doing this now is gathering sentiment data and integrating that into your strategy and using AI to evaluate it. And
Mm,
so if you can pull your employee engagement data, employee feedback, employee suggestions, understanding where they're feeling, is there some fear out there? Can you do some surveys to gather your employee sentiment data? Um, and then also pull in your client success data. Do you have your NPS or any kind of data that you can gather there? Pull that in and use AI to be able to help you pull in the emotional and sentiment data into your strategic planning. And then using your, talking about this AI collaboration at the bottom of the screen here, then once you have it, put it out there for them to provide feedback. You're going to get more success in your strategic delivery if you're engaging your teams in the feedback and ongoing responses. And that's where it is EI, right? When you start to get this higher collaborative environment,
mm,
where they can provide that feedback into something, you're going to get higher adoption. The worst thing you could do is build a strategy that nobody trusts or wants to deliver.
yeah, yeah. And it really does come down. Um, who was it that said every buying decision is an emotional decision?
Yeah,
Every single one. And
everyone.
and we justify it with logic. Like we put the logic on after. And that's the whipped cream on top of the
Yeah,
Thanksgiving pie. But the pie itself is the emotion.
yeah.
Is what does this do for me emotionally? And understanding that sentiment data is critical. That's, as a company, that's going to set the company apart.
Absolutely. And I mean, there is such, I think that's why most companies are doing employee engagement. But do we use that data? Like, so do we use AI to really understand that? We do annual surveys, we do post class surveys at Tech Moms, right? And that data now, I use AI to evaluate, provide feedback, re engage with our community, re engage with our partners. And how do I build stronger engagement and trust of our delivery? Am I hitting all the messaging right? And then
Mm,
I use AI to help me tailor my messaging back out to my clients, whether it's at Rise Next or, within our donor groups. I kind of wear multiple hats, but I can now become more effective in how I'm messaging and engaging our communities, our partners, our clients, because I have a better understanding based on the feedback that they provided.
Yeah.
And in our live calls now. So this is another fun one. With the platform I was talking about, we have a partnership with Workplace AI. So talking about leadership development, right? Which is where I think you've spent a lot of your time. I've done a lot of leadership coaching in this space. But now if you have recordings, like using AI and you're recording your calls, are you getting the sentiment data? And they're working with leadership development companies like the Coveys and others that are providing leadership development and tailoring the AI and the learning to the training that they're providing. So they can be that more tailored perspective from an, and get the emotional sentiment data live within the calls, and provide that feedback out so that they can adjust. It's incredible.
Yeah. I just went to a charity event, was it last night or 2 nights ago, at iHub, which is a tech incubator here locally. And one of the companies, they have a technology that uses AI that lays on top of text messaging, email, etc. And as you type, it pops up a prompt and it says, this might be disruptive, or you might offend the person by saying this. And you've seen it on the news how many times?
Yeah.
There's somebody that sent
Well, stop.
somebody that sent an email that offended the entire company, and now they're in this whole media scandal, and the AI can go in and it can say time out, hold on, before you send. And this tech is so advanced that it will do it real time. And you have to actually either say, I'm disregarding this message or this warning, or I'm going to change it to what you suggest.
Yeah.
And it takes that message and looks at the underlying sentiment behind it and says, okay, you're really trying to say this. You're saying this angry thing where you mean to advocate. And that's one of the counterfeit emotion pairs or dyads, is that advocacy is authentic versus anger, which is counterfeit. So anger counterfeits advocacy. And in the workplace, we need advocacy. We do. It's so important. But if we transition that into anger, then we probably lose our job. Then the media scandals happen and all of those things. And this tech goes in and lays on top of it and says, time out, hold on. Before you hit send, you need to replace this, this, and this. And then you have to consciously say, I'm going to disregard this warning. And that's where people are like, okay.
Interrupts. I think the opportunity here, like throughout my career, anger was the number one emotion. But what's interesting is a lot of people don't really think of anger as an emotion. Because, I would always get comments like, well, oh, that person's emotional. I'm like, do you know how many times you get angry in meetings? Like, that is emotion. You're being emotional when you're angry and you're yelling or upset in a meeting. And how do you control that, right? On this idea of interrupting and changing into this idea of trying to get people to recognize their biases, potential stereotypes, potential toxic. Narcissism is like huge, like as far as the awareness, but how do you interrupt that and retrain for it? It's a huge challenge, right? Yeah. And we're going to be doing, like right after this webinar, we're heading to an event down in Orem, Utah, for our AI Master Series. And one of the individuals that's going to be on the panel today is developing, he's a data scientist, he's been at BYU, his name's Jeffrey Humphreys. He's an expert in AI and machine learning, and he's building a platform like this that is helping for divorcees to be helped communicate. So have you ever, I don't know, having been through this myself, texting and dealing with a co-parent, how toxic those can become sometimes. So developing a platform that can say, hey, probably shouldn't send that, right? Like, let's keep it to just to this. He's developed an AI with a whole emotional intelligence background built into the learning to be able to help with that communication and developing an app for that. So that'll be a really fun conversation. Maybe I'll have to have him on a future webinar here as well, because this is what we're talking about, the opportunities in AI from an emotion AI, and interrupting those immediate impulses we sometimes have in miscommunicating or saying something that probably you should not say, right? And can you capture that in a digital format to help correct, right?
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah. And one thing that's really great about AI that I'm quite excited about, especially since AI is branching into the therapy realm, is that AI comes without bias. And I put a caveat on that
Well, I was
because
gonna say it does.
it does have bias.
You have
It
to
does.
be aware of that. Yeah.
And it's a lot less like if in the therapy world, if like let's say let's take the issue of parental alienation.
Mhm.
In the therapy world, unless you're specifically trained in parental alienation, it's hard to spot. And you'll have a child that says, "Oh, I've got this horrible dad. He's the worst thing ever, and I hate him," and all these things. And the truth is nowhere even close to that. But they've been alienated so far from one parent or the other that that the therapist buys into it. And in the therapy world, that's so damaging because when a child is is saying, "Oh, this horrible monster of a parent that I have to go visit, and I don't want to," the therapist is like, "Oh my goodness, we have to, oh, I have to protect you and surround you with these things." Where an AI can specifically find those nuances and say, "Actually, hold on, time out. Let's look at this more objectively." And
Mhm.
instead of just the natural bias of, "Oh, I need to go protect this child," they say, let's actually see what the big picture is.
Mhm.
Then let's help that child address those things in a healthy way rather than fueling it. Because in a lot of ways, therapy is broken. In a lot of ways,
Yeah.
therapy is so broken because it's just a complain fest that you pay for.
Yeah.
And then the therapist is like, "Yep, come back next week and I'll let you complain some more and I'll validate that complaining."
Yeah.
And
And then here's your invoice.
yeah, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help. It actually perpetuates the problem. It makes it worse rather than being able to step back and say, "Hey, it seems like you're going into a victim mentality.
Yeah.
Let's help you get out of that."
Out of that.
And yeah, and so AI, it is biased. Don't I need to retract because it's biased based on the data that
Data
it,
that it's trained on.
yeah,
I've had to correct, and this is something I've gotten into, and it's probably just because my background is in training and identifying bias and train organizations on it. When I see it, I tell it, "You're biased. Please go try again. Like this isn't accurate." An example of that was we had a exercise we were doing in learning how to leverage AI to write stories, right?
yeah.
And so we were doing this exercise, and it came back and it wrote a story. We were supposed to write a story on how to set a budget, and a story about a couple that was learning to get out of a financial situation. And it immediately wrote a story about a woman that just buys too many shoes. And I'm like, what the? Oh yeah, assuming it's always the woman's fault because she buys too many shoes. I'm like, are
Uh,
you serious right now? Oh my. So I'm like, it's just stuff like that. You do have to be careful. But I think that there's an opportunity definitely within the space of sexist, racist remarks that might be happening. I think there's a huge opportunity within like organizations for performance reviews and having those AI monitored and feedback, maybe not in session, but post session, like, hey, you could have maybe said this differently, or I recognize there was this emotion within the meeting. You could have said this to build it. And like do it for like a upskill training or trainer, because those are really, I mean, you talk about emotional triggers, you talk, even mention the word diversity, equity, and inclusion anymore. It triggers emotion immediately. And that's why some of these industries have been kind of like paused or shut down, is because it's too emotionally triggering. Like we're saying
yeah.
lean into AI, but like not certain areas because that's too emotionally hard for me. I can't go there.
Mm.
So I think that there is opportunity to leverage technology to be able to help drive awareness and still help with those transitions without it being so difficult from an emotional state to be able to address the change that's needed.
Yeah.
That's where I get really excited about some of these opportunities going forward. So,
Yeah, I love what you just said, because every emotion we feel, every emotion we feel is important.
mhm,
And it's what we do with that emotion
yeah,
that changes our destiny. It's not a matter of I'm feeling something, I'm going to ignore it. I'm feeling something, I'm going to numb. I'm feeling something, I'm going to abdicate my feelings to somebody smarter. It's important, and being able to take action on those feelings.
mhm,
There's a reason we have every feeling we have,
yeah,
even the counterfeits. Like
yeah,
there's a reason every emotion is a messenger.
yeah,
The trouble is when we let them become dictators,
yeah,
because feelings aren't fact. Feelings are feelings, but feelings are important to help us because it's giving us a signal that something needs to happen.
yeah,
And that's why they're so important. And when leaders in business can really tap into that and understand that what we're talking about here versus here in
mhm,
our hearts instead of our brains, that drives our actions, then those leaders can really be effective, especially moving forward.
yeah. And speaking of moving forward, I'm like, I just realized we're at an hour. How did that go by so fast? I'm
Wow.
we could talk forever, Chris. I love these conversations, but just kind of as we wrap things up in these last few minutes, talking about where do we start? Because you're right, like everybody's coming from a different place, and you just start from where you are, whether it's wherever you're learning in your AI journey, your EI journey. How do you do this within your organization as a leader? It's taking it a step by step, like just start to invest in AI tools and upskilling and just leaning into it, just starting to develop these EI skills, training, upskilling, kind of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? We say that's number one leadership skill. Emotion is going to create discomfort. These
Yeah.
conversations will create discomfort, but knowing that that's okay, that's part of the process. um, One of the things that I think within Tech Moms, right, we do technology training, but that is not the reason for our success, because there's a lot of higher education institutions out there that are doing technology, right?
Yeah.
The power of our success is all based on emotional transition and acknowledging the emotions. The transformations that happen in these individuals' lives are extremely emotional. It's hard, right? And we acknowledge that right up front and we say, you know what? This is going to be hard. You are going to cry, and I'm going to cry along with you. And it's okay to cry at Tech Moms. We make it okay to have emotions instead of saying, no, you have to be completely flat, right? It's
Yeah.
acknowledging that some of this stuff is really hard and it's okay. It's going to be hard. It's going to be emotional. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to say, okay, let's pause and handle that emotion for a moment and then keep going, right? And I think that in your organizations, you can build that same thing and be like, it's okay if you cry. It's okay if we all just laugh our asses off for a minute because this is so ridiculously hard, right? Like, whatever that is. Um,
Yeah.
but just helping bring organizations together to be able to help move through this massive change that's happening, and bringing those two things together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And I love that you say it's okay to cry. I love that,
It
because
is.
every emotion is brings a message, and those are so important because that's what's in our soul.
Yeah.
And when we tap into our humanity, talking about AI, when we tap into our humanity, that's where we find those emotions, and understanding that is where we get connection. I love to say the bullet train to connection is vulnerability.
Yeah.
If we
Mhm.
get to connection quick, then be vulnerable, step into those emotions, see each other with empathy. And
Mhm.
especially in this rapidly changing world, we need it more than ever.
More than ever. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great place to wrap up, is just um, lean into it, lean into learning and moving forward. Curtis, I so appreciate you being on this call today. I think it's going to be empowering for so many people to start just on this journey of AI and EI, and learning to navigate both of these worlds together. It's a fun one. We're going to be continuing to have conversations as we go forward in this space. So thank you for being here today. And we're going to be talking through in just a little bit at this event. I'm excited for that as well. But for anybody that wants to reach out to Curtis, it's counterfeitemotions.com, right, Curtis? Any other contact information for those that would want to connect with you?
We also have a really active Facebook group that's very supportive. So just do a search on Facebook for Counterfeit Emotions, and or counterfeitemotions.com.
Wonderful. And if you're looking to upskill your organization in AI and EI, get a hold of risenext.com, and we would love to help you on your journey as well. And with that, we'll wrap up for the day. So great to be connected here with everyone. Have a great one.